Samuel Hartley's hands were still dirty from burying his father when the widow arrived, a woman the town had already condemned. He should have turned her away. Everyone said so. But when Jake Morrison rode onto his land with a gun and a threat, Samuel made a choice that would cost him everything: his safety, his ranch, maybe his life. 5 nights. That's all it took for mercy to turn into war, and for a boy to become something his father never lived to see a man who wouldn't break. Before we begin, please subscribe to this channel and stay with me until the very end of this story. Comment below with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Now let's begin. The shovel hit rock again. Samuel's palms split open, fresh blood mixing with the dirt already caked under his nails. He didn't stop. His father deserved better than a shallow grave. "Boy!" Old Dutch stood 10 feet back, hat in his gnarled hands. "That's 6 feet. Deep enough." "Not yet. Your daddy wouldn't want—" "My daddy's dead, Dutch." The words came out like gravel. Dutch's mouth worked, but he just nodded and turned away. Samuel drove the blade in one last time and climbed out. His shirt stuck to his back, his lungs burned, and his hands shook so bad he could barely grip the shovel to lean on it. 19 years old. That's all he was. And now he owned 800 acres of dying grassland, 40 head of cattle, and a loan payment due in 6 days to a man who wanted him to fail. Dutch cleared his throat. "Morrison's men came by this morning." Samuel's head snapped up. While you were at the funeral house, rode the fence line, counted stock, grinned the whole time." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. Wasn't nothing to tell." Dutch spat into the dirt. "But they'll be back. Jake Morrison don't smile unless he's taking something." Samuel looked out at the land, the same land his grandfather had carved out of wilderness 40 years ago. The same land his father had worked himself to death trying to keep. Heart gave out during branding season, collapsed right there in the corral with a hot iron still in his hand. Now it was Samuel's turn to lose it. "How long?" Samuel asked. 6 days. Loans due Friday. Your daddy missed 2 payments already. Morrison bought the note off the bank last month." Cold spread through Samuel's gut. He bought it. Planned it. Been circling this place like a buzzard for a year. The sun dropped behind the western ridge, turning everything blood red. Samuel picked up his hat and brushed the dirt off. "Then I got 6 days. Son." Dutch's voice went quiet. "Your daddy was the best man I ever knew. But good don't always win. Sometimes it just gets you buried faster." Samuel met his eyes. "I know. I buried him today." Dutch looked away first. The house was dark when Samuel walked in, cold. His mother had died when he was 12. Fever took her in 3 days, and his father never learned to make it feel like a home after that. Just a place to sleep between 16-hour days. Samuel lit the lamp on the kitchen table and stared at the empty room. No food in the cupboard, no coffee on the stove. No sound but the wind rattling the windows. He sat down hard in his father's chair and dropped his head into his bloody hands. That's when he heard the wagon. He grabbed the rifle on his way to the porch. Didn't raise it. Not yet. The wagon came slow up the road, single-horse driver in a dark shawl. A woman. She stopped 20 feet out and sat there, hands folded on the reins, waiting. "Ma'am?" Samuel kept his voice level. "You lost—" "No. I'm looking for the Hartley ranch." "You found it." She studied him in the dying light. "You're not William Hartley." "He died yesterday." A pause. "I'm sorry to hear that." Samuel waited. She climbed down, careful like her ribs hurt, and walked closer. Maybe 30. Maybe older. Hard to tell. She had the kind of worn-down face that came from too much sun and not enough sleep, but her eyes were sharp, clear. "My name is Catherine Dalton. I was hoping to speak with Mr. Hartley about boarding here for a spell. I can work. I can pay. This isn't a boarding house. I know. She glanced back at her wagon. The one in town wouldn't take me. Samuel's jaw tightened. Why not? Because I'm a widow, and because my husband died badly. The wind picked up between them, carrying the smell of dust and coming rain. How badly? Samuel asked. Murdered, for debts he didn't pay. She said it flat like she'd said it 100 times before. I killed one of the men who did it. Law cleared me. Town didn't. Something shifted in Samuel's chest, his father's voice rough and steady. Mercy ain't easy, boy. That's why it matters. I can't pay much, Catherine said. But I can cook, mend, keep house. I won't cause you trouble. Ma'am, you just told me you killed a man. I did, and I'd do it again. No shame, no apology, just fact. Samuel looked past her at the empty prairie, at the ranch that was already slipping through his fingers. Everyone in town would tell him to say no. Barn's got a loft room, he said. It's dry. You can stable your horse below. Catherine blinked. You're letting me stay. I'm letting you work. Rest we'll figure out. Something like relief crossed her face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Jake Morrison owns half this county, and most of the people in it. He finds out I'm harboring you. He'll use it to take this place. Then I'll leave before he finds out. No. The word surprised him. You stay. Let him come. Catherine looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. I'll get my things. Samuel woke to the smell of coffee. For a second he thought his father was still alive, that yesterday was just a nightmare. Then he opened his eyes and saw the empty room and remembered. He pulled on his boots and walked downstairs. The kitchen was transformed. Floor swept clean. Stove polished. A pot of coffee steaming on the burner next to a plate of biscuits. The table was set for two. Catherine stood at the window looking out at the dawn. You didn't have to do this, Samuel said. Yes, I did. She turned. You gave me shelter when no one else would. That's not nothing. It's a barn? It's more than I had yesterday. Samuel sat and she poured coffee strong and black. He took a biscuit and bit in. Still warm, flaky. The best thing he'd tasted in months. Where'd you learn to cook like this? My mother, before she died. I'm sorry. Long time ago. Catherine sat across from him with her own cup. Your father, what was he like? Samuel stared into his coffee. Hard, fair. Worked himself to death trying to keep this place running. He looked up. Why? Because sons usually turn out like their fathers. Wanted to know what kind of man I'm working for. And I think you'll do just fine. Samuel didn't know what to say to that, so he just drank his coffee and tried not to think about the fact that in 6 days none of this would be his anymore. I should get to work, he said, standing. I'll come with you. You don't have to. I'm not sitting in that barn while you work yourself to death like your father did. Her voice was firm. If I'm staying, I'm helping. 10. They worked all morning, Samuel, Catherine, and Dutch, rode the fence line checking for breaks, counted cattle, separated the ones fit for sale from the ones too thin to bring decent money. Catherine kept up without complaint, hauled wire, pounded posts. When Samuel's canteen ran dry, she handed him hers without a word. By noon, they'd covered half the ranch. We're short, Dutch said, wiping his brow. Counted 42 head. Should be 60. Samuel's stomach dropped. Where's the rest? Don't know. Could have wandered into the canyon. Could have been driven there. You think Morrison? I think Jake Morrison wants this land bad enough to do just about anything. Samuel looked out at the empty range. 18 head of cattle gone. That was half his loan payment, maybe more. Catherine touched his arm. We'll find them. And if we don't? Then we find another way. There is no other way. Then we make one. She looked him dead in the eye. "You don't strike me as a man who gives up easy." Samuel held her gaze, and something passed between them, something that made his chest tight and his pulse quicken. "Back to work," he said roughly, and spurred his horse toward the canyon. They found the cattle just before sunset, what was left of them. 12 head, driven into a box canyon and spooked. 3 had broken legs from trying to climb out. 2 were already dead. Samuel sat on his horse and stared at the carnage. "Morrison," Dutch said quietly. "You sure? Tracks everywhere. 5 riders. Came through last night while we slept." Dutch spat. "They wanted you to find this." Samuel's hands tightened on the reins until his knuckles went white. "Get what we can out. I'll deal with Morrison." "Samuel." "I said I'll deal with it." He wheeled his horse and rode hard for home, rage burning so hot in his chest he could barely breathe. Catherine caught up to him halfway there. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Whatever you're planning, don't." "He killed my cattle. He's trying to take my land. I'm supposed to just let him—" "No. But if you ride over there angry, you'll do something stupid. And then he wins." Samuel reined up hard. "So what do I do?" "You outthink him." Catherine's voice was steel. "Men like Morrison expect you to come at them with fists and fury. You come at him with something else, you throw him off balance." "Like what?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." She reached over and grabbed his hand. "Together." Samuel looked down at their joined hands, hers small and calloused, his bloody and shaking. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. "Because you helped me first." She squeezed once, then let go. "And because I'm tired of men like Morrison winning." They rode back in silence. The sun was gone, the sky going purple-black, and the first stars were coming out. Samuel unsaddled his horse and was heading for the house when he heard the sound hoofbeats. Multiple horses, coming fast. "Inside," he told Catherine. "Now." "Samuel." "Inside." She ran for the house while Samuel grabbed the rifle and stepped into the yard. 5 riders came out of the darkness. Jake Morrison at the front, his 2 sons flanking him, and 2 hired guns Samuel didn't recognize. Morrison reined up and grinned down at him. "Evening, boy." "Get off my land, Morrison." "That's no way to greet a neighbor." "You're not my neighbor. You're a thief." Morrison's grin widened. "Now that's hurtful. I came to pay my respects. Heard about your daddy. Real shame." "You bought his debt. Don't pretend you're here out of kindness." "Business is business, son. Your daddy understood that." "My daddy understood you're a liar and a snake." The grin finally faded. Morrison leaned forward in his saddle. "You got 5 days left on that loan. 5 days. You miss it, this place is mine." "I'll have your money." "Will you?" Morrison glanced toward the house. "Heard you took in a boarder, woman with a colorful past. That true?" Cold shot through Samuel's veins. "None of your damn business." "It is when it's Catherine Dalton. Killer. Whore. Woman no decent man would touch with a 10-foot pole." Samuel raised the rifle. "Last chance. Get off my land." Morrison laughed low and mean. "You're just like your daddy. Too proud and too stupid to see when you're beat." He turned his horse. 5 days, boy. And when I take this place, I'm gonna burn it to the ground just to watch you cry." They rode off, dust rising in their wake. Samuel stood there, rifle shaking in his hands, heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst. Behind him, the door opened. Catherine stepped out wrapped in a shawl, her face pale. "I'll leave," she said quietly. "Tonight, before they come back." "No. Samuel, he'll destroy you." "Maybe, but he doesn't get to choose who I shelter." Samuel lowered the rifle and looked at her. "The day I let Jake Morrison tell me what's right is the day I stop being my father's son." "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why risk everything for me?" Samuel thought about his father, about Mercy, about the choice between who you are and who the world wants you to be. Because it's the right thing to do, he said, and because if I turn you out to save myself, then Morrison's already won. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. He raised a good man, she whispered. Maybe. Samuel looked out at the dark prairie. We'll find out in 5 days. Done. That night the storm came. Samuel lay in bed listening to the wind howl and the rain hammer the roof. Thunder shook the walls. Lightning turned the room white bright for half a second, then plunged it back into darkness. He was drifting toward sleep when he heard the crash from outside. Samuel grabbed his pants and ran downstairs. Through the window he could see the barn door hanging loose, banging in the wind. He pulled on his boots and coat and ran out into the storm. Rain hit him like fists. Mud sucked at his boots. By the time he reached the barn, he was soaked through and shaking. Inside, Catherine stood in the loft doorway, drenched and shivering. "Roof's leaking!" she shouted over the storm. "Everything's soaked!" Samuel cursed and climbed the ladder. Water poured through a gap in the shingles, turning her bedroll into a sopping mess. "Come on," he yelled. "You can't stay here." "Where?" "The house. My mother's room. It's dry." She hesitated, and he saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, but not of the storm. "Please," Samuel said. "You'll freeze out here." She followed him back across the yard. By the time they reached the porch, they were both shaking so hard they could barely stand. Inside, Samuel lit a lamp and led her upstairs to the small room at the end of the hall. Dusty, unused, but the bed was still made and the quilts were still folded on the chest. "It's not much," he said. "It's perfect." She stood there, dripping, arms wrapped tight around herself. "There's dry clothes in the chest, blankets in the closet." Samuel backed toward the door. "If you need anything." "Samuel." He stopped. "Thank you." He nodded, unable to speak, and closed the door. He woke to screaming. Samuel bolted upright and ran down the hall. Catherine's door was open. She was thrashing in the bed, tangled in sheets, making sounds like a trapped animal. "No, please don't." "Catherine!" He grabbed her shoulders. "Wake up!" Her eyes snapped open, wild, unseeing. "It's me," Samuel said. "You're safe." She stared at him for a long moment, chest heaving, then collapsed back against the pillow. "I'm sorry." Her voice was raw. "God, I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's always the same dream, the night they came." She covered her face with her hands. "I can't make it stop." Samuel sat on the edge of the bed. "You don't have to tell me." "Yes, I do." She lowered her hands. "Because you deserve to know what you've let into your house." "They came at midnight," Catherine said. "4 of them. My husband owed money gambling bad investments. He wasn't a good man, Samuel. Drank too much. Hit me when he was angry. But he didn't deserve what they did." Samuel said nothing. "They beat him in the yard, made me watch from the window. Then they dragged him into the dirt and shot him like a dog." Her voice went flat. "I ran, hid in the root cellar, but one of them found me." "Catherine." "He said I was payment now, said I'd work off the debt on my back." She looked at Samuel. "So I shot him, took my husband's Derringer from where I'd hidden it, and put a bullet through his chest." "Good," Samuel said. She blinked. "What?" "I said good. You did what you had to do. The town doesn't see it that way. The town's full of cowards who'd rather judge you than help you." Samuel's voice was hard. "You survived. That takes more courage than most people have." Catherine stared at him, and something broke in her expression. Something that had been holding itself together for too long. "I'm not brave," she whispered. "I'm terrified, every day, every night, terrified they'll come back. Terrified I'll end up alone and starving in some ditch. Terrified that—" Her voice cracked. "That I'll never feel safe again." Samuel reached out and took her hand. "You're safe here," he said. "I promise you that." "You can't promise that. Not with Morrison." "I don't care about Morrison. I care about you." The words came out before he could stop them, but he didn't take them back. "You're safe here. With me." Catherine's eyes filled with tears, and this time she let them fall. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Samuel thought about his father, about the land, about the choice between safety and soul. "Because someone has to," he said. "And because I think maybe we're supposed to save each other." Catherine made a sound half-sob, half-laugh, and then she was leaning forward and Samuel was leaning in, and their lips met in the darkness. It was soft, tentative, a question. Catherine pulled back, eyes wide. "Samuel? I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "Don't." Her hand came up to cup his face. "Don't apologize." And then she kissed him back harder this time, deeper, like she was drowning, and he was air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Catherine rested her forehead against his. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "I know." "If Morrison finds out, let him." She laughed, quiet and broken. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the most foolish." Probably both. They sat there in the lamplight, foreheads touching, and for the first time since his father died, Samuel felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. Morning came cold and clear. Samuel found Catherine already in the kitchen, coffee brewing, eggs frying in the pan. She looked up when he came in, and something passed between them, a shared secret, a new understanding. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Not much. You?" "No." They ate in comfortable silence, and Samuel realized the house felt different now. Warmer. Like it might actually be a home again. Dutch arrived just after sunup with more bad news. "Found the rest of the herd," he said, not bothering to take off his hat. "Dead. All of them. Driven into the canyon and shot." Samuel felt the floor drop out from under him. "How many?" 16 head. Morrison's work. No question." That was it. That was the loan payment. Gone. "Even if we sell everything we got left," Dutch continued, "we're still short. Way short." "How short?" $300. Maybe more. Samuel sat down hard. $300 might as well be 3,000. He didn't have it. Had no way to get it. Catherine touched his shoulder. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." "Then we find one." "How?" Samuel looked up at her. "How do we find $300 in 4 days?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Because there was no answer. They both knew it. Dutch cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, son. Your daddy would have found a way, but I don't see one." Samuel stood and walked to the window, looked out at the land his grandfather had claimed his father had worked, and now he was going to lose. "Samuel." Catherine's voice was soft. "We'll figure something out." "No." He turned to face her. "We won't. Morrison won. It's over." "It's not over until Friday." "It's over now." Samuel felt something cold and final settle in his chest. "I'm going into town. Gonna see if the bank'll extend the loan. It won't work, but I have to try." "I'll come with you." "No, you stay here. Morrison sees you with me, he'll just use it as more ammunition." Catherine's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Samuel grabbed his hat and walked out. The ride into town took an hour of dust and sun, and thinking about his father, about how hard the old man had worked, how much he'd sacrificed, and how Samuel was about to lose it all. The bank was a small brick building on Main Street. Samuel tied his horse and walked in. The banker, Mr. Gaines, looked up from his desk and frowned. "Samuel, I heard about your father. My condolences. Thank you, sir. I'm here about the loan. Gaines sighed. I figured. Sit down. Samuel sat. I can't help you, Gaines said. Morrison bought the note. It's his decision now, not mine. Can you talk to him? Ask for an extension? I can ask. But Jake Morrison doesn't extend anything unless there's profit in it. I'll pay interest. Double interest. With what money? Gaines leaned forward. Samuel, I've seen your books. You're barely keeping your head above water. You miss this payment, you're done. I know. So why are you here? Samuel met his eyes. Because my father would have tried, and I'm trying to be the man he raised. Gaines was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and held out his hand. I'll talk to Morrison. I can't promise anything, but I'll try. Samuel shook his hand. Thank you. He walked out into the bright sunlight and stood there on the boardwalk, feeling the weight of 4 generations pressing down on his shoulders. That's when he saw her. A woman in a dark dress standing across the street, watching him. Catherine. She'd followed him. Samuel crossed the street, anger rising. I told you to stay at the ranch. I know. I didn't listen. Catherine. I'm not staying behind while you fight this alone. Her voice was fierce. You stood up for me. Now I'm standing with you. Morrison sees you. Let him. She took his hand right there on Main Street in front of God and everyone. I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. If we're going down together. Samuel stared at her, and something broke loose in his chest. Something that had been holding itself in check since his father died. You're insane, he said. Probably. She smiled. But so are you. He laughed the first real laugh in days and pulled her into a kiss right there in the middle of town. People stopped and stared, whispered, pointed. Samuel didn't care. When they finally pulled apart, Catherine was grinning. Well, she said, that should get back to Morrison by noon. Probably. Good. They walked down the street hand in hand, and Samuel realized something. Even if he lost the ranch, even if Morrison took everything he had he had her, and maybe that was enough. They rode back to the ranch as the sun climbed high. The day was clear and hot, the kind of day that made you forget winter was coming. Dutch met them in the yard, his face grim. Morrison was here, he said. Samuel's stomach dropped. When? An hour ago. Came with the sheriff and a piece of paper. What kind of paper? Dutch handed it over. Samuel unfolded it and read. Eviction notice, he said quietly. Effective Friday at noon. Catherine looked over his shoulder. Can he do that? He owns the note. He can do whatever he wants. Samuel crumpled the paper. It's over. No. Catherine grabbed his arm. It's not over. We still have 3 days. To do what? Pull $300 out of thin air. If that's what it takes, yes. Samuel looked at her, this woman who'd lost everything and still had the strength to fight, and felt something harden in his chest. You're right, he said. We're not done yet. Damn right we're not. Dutch cleared his throat. There might be one thing. They both turned. The old silver mine, Dutch said. Up in the hills. Your granddaddy worked it back in the day, played out 30 years ago, but there might still be something there. Samuel frowned. How much something? Don't know, but it's worth a look. It was a long shot, a desperate long shot, but it was all they had. We ride at first light, Samuel said. Wow, Chen. That night Samuel couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the mine. About Morrison. About the fact that in 3 days he might be homeless. Around midnight, he heard the floorboards creak. Catherine stood in his doorway wrapped in a quilt, her hair loose around her shoulders. Can't sleep either, she asked. No. Can I come in? Samuel sat up. Yeah. She crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. I keep thinking about my husband, Catherine said finally. About how he died. About how I couldn't save him. That wasn't your fault. I know, but it feels like it was. She looked at Samuel. And now I'm watching you fight for this place and I'm terrified you're going to lose it because of me. This isn't because of you. Morrison wanted this land long before you showed up. But I made it worse. I gave him ammunition. No. Samuel reached out and took her hand. You gave me a reason to fight. Catherine's breath caught. Before you came, Samuel continued, I was just going through the motions, working the land because that's what I was supposed to do, but I didn't care. Not really. He squeezed her hand. You made me care again. Samuel. I'm glad you're here, he said. Even if we lose, even if Morrison takes everything, I'm glad I met you. Catherine made a sound half sob, half laugh, and then she was leaning in, and Samuel was pulling her close, and they were kissing like the world was ending. Maybe it was. But for right now, in this moment, they had each other, and that was enough. They rode out at dawn. Samuel, Catherine, and Dutch. The mine was 3 hours north up in the hills, where the pine trees grew thick and the air smelled like resin and old snow. The entrance was half-collapsed, boarded up with rotting planks. Your granddaddy sealed it when the silver ran out, Dutch said. Said it wasn't safe. Samuel pulled the boards away. Inside the tunnel stretched back into darkness. I'll go first, he said. Like hell you will. Catherine grabbed a lantern. We go together. They walked into the mine side by side, lantern light casting wild shadows on the walls. The air was cold and damp, smelling of earth and rust. 20 feet in the tunnel split. Left or right? Catherine asked. Left, Samuel said because his gut told him to. They followed the left tunnel deeper into the mountain. The walls closed in. The ceiling dropped. Samuel had to duck to keep from hitting his head. And then they saw it. A glint in the lantern light. A vein of something running through the rock. Is that... Catherine started. Silver, Dutch breathed. By God, it's silver. Samuel reached out and touched it. The vein was narrow, but it ran deep into the wall. Maybe 10 feet. Maybe more. How much? He asked. Dutch squinted. Hard to say, but if we can get it out, maybe enough. Samuel felt something like hope flicker in his chest. Then we dig. They worked for 2 days straight. Pickaxes, shovels, bare hands when the tools broke. The silver came out in chunks, small pieces, but enough. Enough to matter. By the second evening, they'd filled 3 sacks. That's it, Dutch said, wiping his brow. Veins played out. Samuel looked at the sacks. Is it enough? Only one way to find out. They rode back to the ranch that night, exhausted and filthy. Samuel weighed the silver on his father's old scale. $270. Close. So close. But not enough. We're 30 short, Samuel said. Catherine touched his arm. We'll find it. How we've got 1 day left. Then we sell something. The wagon, my horse, whatever it takes. Catherine. I said whatever it takes. Samuel looked at her, and he knew win or lose, he was keeping this woman in his life. All right, he said. We go into town tomorrow, sell the silver, sell whatever else we have to, and we make that payment. Dinner. Friday morning came bright and cold. Samuel loaded the silver into the wagon while Catherine packed food for the trip. Dutch saddled the horses. You ready? Catherine asked. No, Samuel said honestly. But let's do it anyway. They rode into town with the sun at their backs. Main Street was quiet, too quiet. The assayer's office was closed. That's strange, Dutch said. Should be open by now. Samuel tried the door. locked. A voice spoke from behind them. "He won't be opening today." Samuel turned. Jake Morrison stood in the street grinning like a wolf. His two sons flanked him along with 4 hired guns. "You're too late, boy," Morrison said. "Noon deadline. You missed it." "It's 11:30, Samuel said. "Heir's closed. Can't make a payment if there's nowhere to make it." Morrison's grin widened. "That ranch is mine now, and you got 1 hour to get off it." Samuel felt the ground shift beneath him. He'd lost. After everything. After the work, the silver, the fight he'd lost. Catherine grabbed his hand. "No, we're not done." "Catherine, I said we're not done." She stepped forward. "You cheated. You closed the assayer's office so we couldn't make the payment." Morrison shrugged. "Prove it." "I don't have to prove it. Everyone in this town knows what you are." "And what's that Mrs. Dalton? A coward who hides behind money because he's too weak to win fair." Morrison's face went dark. "You better watch your mouth, woman. Or what? You'll have me killed like you had my husband killed." The street went dead silent. Morrison took a step forward. "What did you say?" "I said you killed my husband. Or had him killed. Same difference." Catherine's voice was steel. "He owed money to one of your associates. You ordered the hit. And when I killed one of your men in self-defense, you made sure I'd never find work again. You can't prove that." "Can't I?" Catherine pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "Found this in your man's coat, the one I shot. It's a ledger, with your name on it, and my husband's name, and a note that says, 'Collect or eliminate.'" Morrison's face went white. "That's right," Catherine said. "I've had it all along. Been waiting for the right moment to use it. Looks like today's the day." Morrison's hand went to his gun. "Give me that paper." "No." "I said give it to me." "And I said no." Morrison drew his gun. Samuel stepped in front of Catherine. "You shoot her, you'll have to shoot me too." "Gladly." "And me," Dutch said, stepping forward. And then one by one, people started coming out of the buildings. The blacksmith, the shopkeeper, the widow Henderson, a dozen townspeople all stepping into the street, all standing with Samuel. Morrison looked around, and for the first time Samuel saw fear in his eyes. "What is this?" Morrison said. "It's called accountability," the sheriff said, stepping forward. He'd been watching from the saloon. "And I'm taking that ledger as evidence. Jake Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." Morrison's sons drew their guns. The sheriff's shotgun came up. "Don't." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Morrison lowered his gun. "This isn't over." "Yeah," Samuel said. "It is." The sheriff took Morrison into custody. His sons and hired guns scattered, and Samuel stood there in the middle of Main Street holding Catherine's hand, trying to process what just happened. "Did we just win?" he asked. Catherine laughed, bright and real. "I think we did." The assayer opened his office. Samuel made the payment with 5 minutes to spare. The deed to the ranch stayed in his name. He'd won. They'd won. That night, Samuel and Catherine stood on the porch watching the sun set over the prairie. "What now?" Catherine asked. "Now." Samuel pulled her close. "Now we rebuild. Together." "Together," she echoed. And as the stars came out one by one, Samuel realized something. He'd started this week as a boy trying to hold on to his father's legacy. He was ending it as a man who'd built his own. And that made all the difference. The victory lasted exactly 3 hours. Samuel and Catherine were still on the porch when Dutch came riding hard from the north pasture, his horse lathered and blowing. "Fire!" he shouted, reining up in a spray of dirt. "The north fence line! Whole section's burning!" Samuel was moving before Dutch finished talking. He grabbed a bucket from the well and ran for the barn. Catherine was right behind him. "Stay here," Samuel said. "Not a chance." They rode out together, following the orange glow on the horizon. By the time they reached the fence line, 20 acres were already burning. The fire ate through the dry grass like it was starving, sending up black smoke that blotted out the stars. Samuel jumped off his horse and started beating at the flames with a wet blanket. The heat seared his face. Smoke choked his lungs. Catherine worked beside him, neither of them speaking, both of them knowing what this meant. Morrison might be in jail, but his sons weren't. They fought the fire for 2 hours. By the time they got it under control, Samuel's hands were blistered and his throat was raw from breathing smoke. He stood there in the blackened field, staring at the destruction, and felt something cold settle in his gut. "This was just the opening move," he said. Catherine touched his arm. "Then we'd better be ready for the next one." They rode back to the ranch as dawn broke. Samuel was so tired he could barely sit his horse, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. The Morrisons weren't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. Dutch was waiting in the yard, rifle across his lap. "Saw riders heading east about an hour ago," he said. "3 of them, moving fast." "Morrison's boys," Samuel said. "Yep, they'll be back." Samuel dismounted and helped Catherine down. Her face was streaked with ash, her dress torn and filthy, but her eyes were clear. "We need help," she said. "We can't fight them alone." "Who's going to help us?" "The whole town's afraid of the Morrisons." "Not the whole town. You saw them today. They stood up." "They stood up when the sheriff was there. When it was safe." Samuel shook his head. "It's different now." "Then we make it safe." Catherine grabbed his arm. "We rode into town and forced Morrison's hand. We can do it again." Samuel looked at her, and despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the burned pasture, he felt something like hope stir in his chest. "All right," he said. "We go back to town, but first we need evidence." "Evidence of what?" "That Morrison's sons are behind this. The sheriff can't do anything without proof." Dutch spat into the dirt. "How you planning to get proof?" Samuel was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his eyes went to the burned fence line, and an idea started forming. "We set a trap," he said. They spent the rest of the morning preparing. Samuel rode to the far pasture and moved the remaining cattle closer to the house where they could watch them. Catherine cleaned and loaded every gun they owned, 3 rifles, 2 pistols, and his father's old shotgun. Dutch reinforced the barn doors and shuttered the windows. By noon, the ranch looked like a fortress. "You really think they'll come back tonight?" Catherine asked. "I'd bet my life on it." Samuel checked the loads in his rifle. "Morrison's boys aren't smart, but they're mean. They'll want revenge for their father, and they'll want it fast. So we wait. We wait." The afternoon crawled by. Samuel tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every sound made him jump. Wind rattling the shutters, horses shifting in the barn, the creak of old wood settling. Catherine sat at the kitchen table, cleaning her derringer for the 3rd time. "You ever kill a man?" Samuel asked. She looked up. "You know I have." "I mean besides that one. In self-defense." "No." She set down the gun. "Why?" "Because I haven't either. And I'm trying to figure out if I can." Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and crossed to where he sat by the window. "When the time comes," she said, "you'll know what to do. Your body will know even if your mind doesn't." "How do you know?" "Because that's how it was for me." She touched his face. "I didn't plan to shoot that man. I didn't think about it. I just did it. And afterward—" She trailed off. "Afterward what?" "Afterward, I felt nothing. No guilt. No regret. Just relief that I was still breathing." Her eyes met his. "That's what scared me most. How easy it was." Samuel took her hand. "You did what you had to do." "I know, but knowing doesn't make it easier to live with." They stood there together as the sun dropped toward the horizon, both of them thinking about what the night might bring. Mine. The riders came at midnight. Samuel heard them before he saw them. The soft thud of hooves on hard-packed dirt, the jingle of spurs, the low murmur of voices. He was at the window in an instant, rifle in hand. They're here. Catherine and Dutch moved to their positions. Catherine upstairs at the bedroom window, Dutch in the barn loft. They'd planned this hours ago, gone over it until everyone knew their role. Samuel watched through a crack in the shutters as four shapes materialized out of the darkness. Morrison's two sons, Clay and Will, plus two men Samuel didn't recognize. They stopped 50 yards out, just beyond rifle range. Hartley, Clay's voice carried across the yard. We know you're in there. Come out and face us like a man. Samuel said nothing. We're giving you one chance, Clay continued. Pack up and leave. Tonight. Or we burn you out. Still Samuel stayed silent. Will Morrison laughed ugly and mean. He's too scared to answer. Let's just torch the place and be done with it. Wait. One of the other men spoke up. What about the woman, the killer? She in there too. Probably cowering under the bed, Clay said. We'll deal with her after we deal with Hartley. Samuel's finger tightened on the trigger, but he didn't fire. Not yet. He needed them closer. The riders started moving again, spreading out as they approached the house. Two toward the barn, two toward the main house. Samuel waited until they were 30 yards out, then fired a shot into the dirt in front of Clay's horse. The animal reared, nearly throwing its rider. The other men pulled up short. That's close enough, Samuel shouted. Turn around and go home. Clay got his horse under control and glared at the house. You just made a big mistake, boy. The only mistake here is yours. The sheriff knows you burned my pasture. He's got men watching the road. You touch this ranch again, you'll hang right next to your father. It was a bluff. The sheriff had no men watching anything, but Clay didn't know that. You're lying, Clay said, but Samuel heard the uncertainty in his voice. Am I? You want to test it? Go ahead. Burn my barn. See how fast a rope finds your neck. The four men exchanged glances. Samuel held his breath. Then one of them, the older one, turned his horse. I didn't sign on for a hanging. I'm out. You walk away now, you don't get paid, Clay said. Can't spend money if I'm dead. The man rode off into the darkness. The other hired gun hesitated, then followed. Now it was just the Morrison brothers. Will pulled his pistol. We don't need them. We can handle one kid and a woman. Put the gun down, Samuel said. Make me. Samuel fired again, this time over Will's head. The bullet whined into the night. Next one's not a warning, Samuel said. Clay grabbed his brother's arm. Let's go. What, we're just giving up? I said let's go. Clay jerked his horse around. This isn't over, Hartley. Not by a long shot. They rode off and Samuel watched until they disappeared into the darkness. Only then did he lower the rifle. His hands were shaking. Catherine came down the stairs, her face pale. Did we just win again? For tonight, Samuel said. But Clay was right. This isn't over. They took turns standing watch that night. Samuel had the last shift, and he stood on the porch watching the sun come up over the burned pasture. He was so tired he felt hollow, like something had been scooped out of him, and all that was left was the shell. Catherine found him there an hour after dawn. You should sleep, she said. Can't. Samuel. I keep thinking about my father, about how he worked this land for 30 years and never had to point a gun at another man, never had to choose between fighting and running. Samuel's voice was rough. And here I am, 19 years old, and I've already made more enemies than he did in his whole life. Catherine sat beside him on the porch steps. Your father had different times, easier times. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just doing it wrong. You're not. She took his hand. You're doing the best you can with what you've got. That's all anyone can ask. Samuel wanted to believe her, But the weight of it all, the ranch, the debt, Morrison, the fire felt like it was crushing him. What if it's not enough? He asked quietly. What if I lose everything anyway? Then we start over, somewhere else. Just like that. Just like that. Catherine squeezed his hand. You think this ranch is your father's legacy. But it's not. You are. And a legacy isn't about land or money or what you own. It's about who you are when everything else is gone. Samuel looked at her and something shifted in his chest. She was right. He knew she was right. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. They spent the next 2 days fortifying the ranch. Samuel and Dutch dug a trench around the barn and filled it with water from the creek. They moved all the ammunition into the house and nailed planks over the windows. Catherine sewed sandbags and stacked them by the doors. By the third evening, the ranch looked like a war camp. You really think they'll try again? Dutch asked. I know they will. Samuel hammered the last nail into a shutter. Morrison's sons aren't the type to let this go. They'll keep coming until one of us is dead. Then maybe we should leave. Head east. Start fresh somewhere. Morrison's name don't mean nothing. Samuel paused mid-swing. The thought had crossed his mind more than once. Pack up Catherine and whatever they could carry, and just go. Leave the ranch, the debt, the whole mess behind. It would be easy, it would be smart, but it would also be giving up. No, Samuel said. We stay. Son, I said we stay. Samuel drove the nail home with one hard blow. This is my land, my father's land, and I'm not letting Jake Morrison's bastard sons take it from me. Dutch studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, then we'd better be ready for a fight. The fight came that night, not from the Morrisons, from someone Samuel never expected. He was in the barn checking the horses when he heard a wagon coming up the road. Fast. Too fast for this time of night. Samuel grabbed his rifle and stepped into the yard. The wagon came into view, lantern swinging wildly from the driver's seat. It was the widow Henderson from town. She reined up hard, her horse blowing and stamping. Samuel, thank God you're here. Mrs. Henderson, what's wrong? It's the Morrisons, Clay and Will. They're gathering men. I heard them in the saloon tonight. They're planning to ride out here at dawn with a dozen guns and burn you out. Samuel's blood went cold. A dozen? Maybe more. They're offering $50 a head to anyone who'll ride with them. Mrs. Henderson's hands were shaking on the reins. You need to leave. Tonight. Before they come. How do you know about this? I serve drinks at the saloon. Men talk like I'm not even there. She leaned forward. Samuel, I'm serious. You can't fight that many. You'll die. Catherine came out of the house, shotgun in hand. What's going on? Morrisons are coming at dawn, Samuel said. With an army. Catherine's face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. Then we'd better get ready. Mrs. Henderson looked between them. You're not leaving. No, ma'am, Samuel said. We're staying. Then you're fools, both of you. But her eyes were wet. God help you. She turned the wagon and rode back toward town. Samuel stood in the yard, rifle hanging loose in his hand, trying to process what she'd just told him. A dozen guns, maybe more. They couldn't fight that. Not the three of them. Catherine touched his arm. We need to get word to the sheriff. Won't matter. Morrison's got half the town on his payroll. Sheriff won't move against that many men. Then what do we do? Samuel looked at the ranch. The house his grandfather built, the barn. His father raised the land that had been Hartley land for 40 years. He thought about running. About loading Catherine and Dutch into a wagon and disappearing into the night. But then he thought about his father's voice. A man who won't stand for something will fall for anything. We fight, Samuel said. Against a dozen men. Against 100 if we have to. He looked at her. I'm not running. Not from this. Catherine studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Then we make them pay for every inch. They worked through the night. Samuel positioned barrels of water around the house in case of fire. Dutch rigged tripwires across the approaches to the barn. Catherine loaded every gun twice and laid them out where they could be grabbed fast. By the time the first gray light touched the eastern sky, they were as ready as they'd ever be. Samuel stood on the porch watching the road rifle in hand. Catherine came out and stood beside him. You scared? Terrified. Me too. She slipped her hand into his. But I'm glad I'm here, with you. Samuel squeezed her hand. If this goes bad, it won't. But if it does, I want you to know. He stopped trying to find the words. Catherine turned to face him. I know. I feel it too. They kissed there in the dawn light, slow and deep, like they were trying to memorize each other. When they pulled apart, the sun was coming up, and with it came the riders. They appeared on the horizon like ghosts, a long line of men on horseback moving slow and deliberate. Samuel counted them as they got closer. 15, maybe 16. More than Mrs. Henderson said. More than they could possibly fight. Clay Morrison rode at the front, a rifle across his saddle. His brother Will rode beside him, grinning like this was the best day of his life. They stopped 100 yards out. Hartley, Clay's voice carried across the morning air. Last chance. Walk away now, and we'll let you live. Samuel stepped to the edge of the porch. This is my land. I'm not going anywhere. Then you'll die on it. Maybe. But I'll take some of you with me. Clay's face darkened. You got 3 guns against 16. You really think you can win? Don't know. But I guess we'll find out. Clay raised his hand, and the line of riders started moving forward. Samuel's heart hammered. This was it. This was the moment. He raised his rifle. Catherine moved to the window with the shotgun. Dutch climbed into the barn loft with the other rifle. The riders came closer. 50 yards. 40. Samuel sighted down the barrel, his finger on the trigger. 30 yards. 20. And then a voice shouted from behind the line of riders. Hold! Everyone froze. A single rider came through the line, an older man on a gray horse. Samuel recognized him, John Hutchins, one of the biggest ranchers in the county. What are you doing, John? Clay demanded. Stopping you from making a damn fool mistake. Hutchins rode forward until he was between Clay and the house. You ride on this ranch, you'll have to go through me first. Why the hell would you stop us? Because this boy paid his debt. Because your father broke the law and got arrested for it. And because I'm tired of the Morrison family thinking they own this county. Hutchins turned in his saddle and looked at the other riders. Any man who rides with the Morrisons today is an outlaw. The sheriff made that clear last night. You want to risk a rope for $50, that's your business. But I won't stand by and watch it. Several of the riders exchanged glances. One of them turned his horse and rode away. Then another. Then 3 more. Within a minute, only 6 men were left. Clay's face went purple. You're all cowards. No, Hutchins said calmly. We're just not stupid. He looked at Samuel. You all right, son? Samuel could barely speak. Yes, sir. Good. Because you're going to need help rebuilding that north pasture. I'll send some men over tomorrow. Mr. Hutchins, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just remember it when the next young rancher needs help. Hutchins tipped his hat. Your father was a good man, Samuel. He'd be proud of you. He turned his horse and rode off. Clay sat there shaking with rage, his 6 remaining men looking uncertain. This isn't over, Clay said. Yeah, Samuel said. It is. Go home, Clay, before someone gets hurt. For a moment, Samuel thought Clay might charge anyway. Thought he might be so consumed by rage that he'd throw his life away just to get revenge. But then Will touched his brother's arm. Clay, let's go. Clay jerked his reins so hard his horse's head snapped back. "You haven't won Hartley, not by a long shot." But he turned and rode away, his remaining men following. Samuel stood on the porch, rifle still in his hands, and watched them disappear over the ridge. Then his legs gave out, and he sat down hard on the steps. Catherine was beside him in an instant. "You all right?" "I don't know." Samuel's hands were shaking so bad he could barely hold the rifle. I thought we were going to die." "So did I." She pulled him close. "But we didn't." Dutch came out of the barn, his face grim. "That was too close. Way too close." Samuel agreed. He looked up at the old foreman. "You think they'll come back? Not with the whole county watching. Morrison name's mud now. They try anything else, they'll hang for sure." Samuel wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe it was finally over. But something in his gut told him different. The rest of the day passed in a strange, quiet tension. Samuel walked the property, checking fence lines and counting cattle, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept seeing Clay Morrison's face, the rage in his eyes, the promise of violence. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, jumping at every sound. Around 2 a.m, he gave up and went downstairs. Catherine was in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of tea. "Couldn't sleep either?" Samuel asked. "No." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." He sat. They were quiet for a while, just listening to the wind outside. "You think it's really over?" Catherine asked finally. "I don't know. Part of me thinks yes. Part of me thinks Clay's just waiting for us to let our guard down." "So what do we do?" "We live." Samuel reached across the table and took her hand. "We live our lives and work this ranch and try to be happy. And if the Morrisons come back, we deal with it then." Catherine smiled, small and sad. "You make it sound simple." "Maybe it is. Maybe we're the ones making it complicated." "Maybe." She squeezed his hand. "Samuel, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "When this is really over, when we don't have to worry about Morrison or fires or men with guns, what do you want?" Samuel thought about it. "I want to rebuild. Make this place what my father always dreamed it could be. Run cattle, maybe grow some crops, build something that lasts. And I want you here, with me, not as a boarder, not as someone who works for room and board." He met her eyes. "As my wife." Catherine's breath caught. "Samuel, I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I also know I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." He held her gaze. "So I'm asking, when this is over, when we can breathe again, will you marry me?" Tears welled in Catherine's eyes, but she was smiling. "Yes. Yes. Yes, you fool." She laughed and cried at the same time. "Of course, yes." Samuel came around the table and pulled her into his arms, and they held each other there in the lamplight, while the wind howled outside and the night pressed close. For the first time in weeks, Samuel felt something like peace. Morning came cold and bright. Samuel woke to find Catherine already up making breakfast. The smell of bacon and coffee filled the house, and for a moment he could almost believe everything was normal. Almost. Dutch arrived just after sunrise with news. "Sheriff arrested Clay and Will Morrison last night," he said, accepting a cup of coffee from Catherine. "Caught them trying to burn down Hutchins' barn." Samuel's eyebrows shot up. "They went after Hutchins?" "Yep. Guess they figured if they couldn't get to you, they'd go after the man who stopped them." Dutch shook his head. "Stupid. Real stupid. Hutchins had men watching. They didn't even make it to the barn before they got caught." "So it's really over," Catherine said. "Looks like." Dutch raised his cup. "To surviving." They drank to that. Later that morning, Samuel rode into town to see the sheriff. The jail was a small stone building behind the courthouse. Clay and Will Morrison sat in the single cell, both looking like cornered animals. The sheriff, a heavy-set man named Briggs, nodded when Samuel walked in. "Come to gloat," Clay spat from behind the bars. "No," Samuel said. "I came to ask the sheriff what happens next." Briggs leaned back in his chair. "They'll stand trial. Probably get 5 to 10 years for attempted arson. Add in the charges from burning your pasture and they might be looking at 20. And their father? Jake Morrison's going away for a long time. Conspiracy to commit murder extortion fraud. Judge threw the book at him." Briggs smiled. "Morrison family's done in this county." Samuel should have felt relief, should have felt victorious, but all he felt was tired. "Thank you, Sheriff," he said. He turned to leave, but Clay's voice stopped him. "This is your fault, Hartley. All of it. You and that murdering whore you're protecting." Samuel turned slowly. "Watch your mouth. Or what, you'll shoot me, like she shot that man in cold blood." Clay pressed against the bars. "Everyone knows what she is. A killer, Samuel crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed Clay through the bars, slamming him against the iron. "You don't talk about her," Samuel said, his voice deadly quiet. "You don't even think about her. You understand me." Clay tried to pull away, but Samuel held him fast. "You're weak," Clay hissed. "Just like your father, too weak to hold what's yours." Samuel let him go and stepped back. "My father died trying to build something. Your father's dying in prison because he spent his life tearing things down. You tell me who was weak." He walked out before Clay could respond. The ride back to the ranch was long and quiet. Samuel's hands still shook from the confrontation. He'd come so close to hitting Clay, so close to letting his anger win. But he hadn't, and that felt like a victory all its own. When he got home, Catherine was in the yard hanging laundry. She saw his face and dropped the shirt she was holding. "What happened?" He told her everything. When he finished, Catherine wrapped her arms around him and held him tight. "You did good," she said. "Doesn't feel like it." "I know, but you did." She pulled back and looked at him. "You could have hurt him. You wanted to. But you didn't. That's strength, Samuel. Real strength." He wanted to believe her, but the anger was still there, simmering just below the surface. "I keep thinking about what he said. About you. And I just—" His voice cracked. "I wanted to kill him, Catherine. I really did. But you didn't. That's what matters." They stood there in the yard holding each other while the wind carried the smell of fresh-washed clothes and the sun climbed higher in the sky. Finally, Catherine spoke. "We should get married." Samuel blinked. "What?" "I said we should get married. Soon. Before anything else happens." "Catherine, we don't have to rush." "I'm not rushing. I'm choosing." She took his face in her hands. "I spent 2 years running. 2 years being afraid. I'm done with that. I want to marry you. I want to build a life here. And I don't want to wait." Samuel searched her eyes and saw nothing but certainty. "All right," he said. "When?" "Tomorrow. Next week. I don't care. Just soon." He kissed her, then deep and long, and when they pulled apart, they were both grinning like fools. "You're sure about this?" Samuel asked. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." They were married 3 days later in the small church on the edge of town. Dutch stood as witness. Mrs. Henderson and John Hutchins came. A few other townspeople showed up, people who'd watched Samuel stand up to Morrison and decided he was worth supporting. The preacher kept it simple. No long sermon, no flowery words, just the vows and a prayer. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Catherine like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, because she was. Afterward, they had a small celebration at the ranch. Mrs. Henderson brought food. Hutchins brought whiskey. They ate and drank and laughed, and for a few hours, Samuel forgot about Morrison and debts and burned pastures. He just held his wife and felt grateful. That night, after everyone had gone home, Samuel and Catherine stood on the porch watching the stars come out. "You happy?" he asked. "Yes." She leaned against him. "Are you?" More than I ever thought I'd be." They were quiet for a while, just breathing together. "Samuel," Catherine said finally, "thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. For believing in me. For giving me a home when no one else would." Her voice was thick with emotion. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm grateful." Samuel turned her to face him. "You survived. That's what you did. You survived when most people would have given up, and that makes you the strongest person I know." Catherine's eyes filled with tears, and she kissed him soft and deep and full of promise. They went inside together, and Samuel closed the door on the darkness outside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new struggles, but tonight they had each other, and that was enough. The peace lasted exactly 2 weeks. Samuel woke on a Tuesday morning to find Catherine already dressed, standing at the bedroom window with her arms wrapped around herself. "What's wrong?" he asked, pulling on his pants. "Riders. Coming from the east." Samuel was at the window in 3 steps. Sure enough, 2 horses were making their way up the road, but these weren't Morrison men. These riders moved different, purposeful, but not aggressive. "I'll go see what they want," Samuel said, reaching for his rifle. Catherine caught his arm. "We go together." They met the riders in the yard. One was a young man, maybe 25, with a tin star pinned to his vest. The other was older, gray-haired, carrying himself like a man who'd seen too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. "Samuel Hartley?" the younger one asked. "That's me." The man dismounted and held out a paper. "I'm Deputy Marshal Crawford. This is Marshal Hendricks. We're here about Jake Morrison." Samuel's stomach dropped. "What about him?" "He's dead. Killed in his cell 3 nights ago." Catherine's hand found Samuel's. "How?" "Someone got to him. Paid off a guard, most likely." Crawford's face was grim. "Stabbed him in his sleep. Clean job. Professional." Samuel tried to process this. Morrison dead. It should have felt like relief, like justice. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something worse. "Why are you telling us?" Samuel asked. Marshal Hendricks finally spoke, his voice rough as gravel. "Because the last thing Morrison said before he died was your name. Said you'd pay for what you did to his family." "I didn't do anything to his family. He brought this on himself." "I know that. You know that. But his boys don't see it that way." Hendricks shifted in his saddle. "Clay and Will broke out of jail yesterday. Killed a guard doing it. They're in the wind now, and my guess is they're coming here." The blood drained from Catherine's face. Samuel felt his chest tighten. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Hard to say. Could be days. Could be hours." Crawford looked around the ranch. "You got anyone who can help? Anyone you can call on?" "A few neighbors, maybe." "Call on them, because when those boys show up, they won't come alone, and they won't come to talk." Hendricks turned his horse. "We'll keep looking, but you'd best prepare for the worst." They rode off, leaving Samuel and Catherine standing in the yard. "We should run," Catherine said quietly. "Pack what we can and go. Tonight." Samuel looked at her. "You want to run?" "I want you alive. I want us alive." Her voice cracked. "We can't fight them again, Samuel. Not after everything." "So we just abandon the ranch, everything we fought for." "It's just land. We can get more land. But I can't get another you." Samuel pulled her close and held her while she shook. He understood her fear, felt it himself, but something in him refused to back down. "Listen to me," he said. "If we run now, we'll run forever. Every time someone threatens us, every time things get hard, we'll run. Is that the life you want?" "No, but I don't want to die either." "We won't." He cupped her face. "I promise you. We'll be ready this time. We'll be smarter, and we won't face them alone." Catherine searched his eyes, then nodded slowly. "All right. But if this goes bad..." "It won't." But if it does, I want you to promise me something. Anything. You'll save yourself, even if it means leaving me behind. Catherine, promise me, Samuel. He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her he'd never leave her. But he saw the fear in her eyes and knew she needed to hear this. I promise, he lied. She kissed him then, desperate and fierce, and he held her like he could keep the whole world away through sheer force of will. When they pulled apart, her face was set with determination. All right, she said. What do we do first? They spent the morning making plans. Samuel rode to John Hutchins' ranch and explained the situation. Hutchins listened without interrupting, then nodded once. I'll send 5 men, good men. They'll be at your place by sunset. I can't pay them. Don't need to. Morrison caused trouble for all of us. Time we ended it for good. Hutchins shook Samuel's hand. Your father would have done the same for me. Samuel rode next to the Henderson place. Mrs. Henderson's son, a quiet man named Thomas, agreed to come. So did 2 of his ranch hands. By the time Samuel got back home, it was mid-afternoon. Catherine had been busy too. She'd moved all the valuables into the root cellar, boarded up the downstairs windows, and laid out ammunition on every surface. Dutch is checking the approaches, she said. Making sure there's no easy way in. Good. Samuel looked around at the fortified house. How much food do we have? Enough for a week if we ration. Water's the bigger problem. We've got the well, but if they cut us off from it, they won't. We'll set up a watch rotation, someone on the well at all times. Catherine nodded, but he could see the worry in her eyes. What? He asked. I keep thinking about what the marshal said, that Clay and Will won't come alone. She turned to face him. How many men do you think they'll bring? Samuel had been wondering the same thing. Hard to say. Morrison had connections all over the territory. Could be 5 men. Could be 20. And we'll have, what, 8, 9? Something like that. Those aren't good odds, Samuel. No, they're not. He pulled her close. But we've beaten worse. Have we? He didn't answer because they both knew the truth. They'd been lucky so far. Lucky that Hutchins showed up when he did. Lucky that the townspeople turned on Morrison. Lucky that the sheriff acted when he needed to. But luck ran out eventually. That night the men started arriving. Hutchins sent his 5 as promised hard-faced ranch hands who knew how to shoot and didn't ask unnecessary questions. Thomas Henderson came with his 2 men. Dutch made 9 guns against however many Clay Morrison could muster. Samuel gathered them in the yard as the sun set. I won't lie to you, he said. This is going to be bad. Clay and Will Morrison are coming, and they're coming for blood. Mine specifically. But anyone who stands with me becomes a target. The men looked at each other, but nobody moved. That said, Samuel continued, I'm not asking anyone to die for me. You want to leave? Leave now. No judgment. Still, nobody moved. One of Hutchins' men, a lean cowboy named Reese, spat into the dirt. Morrison family's been a cancer on this county for years. About time someone cut it out. The others murmured agreement. Samuel felt something tighten in his chest. All right then. Here's how we do this. He laid out the plan. Watch rotations. Firing positions, fallback points if things went wrong. The men listened and asked smart questions, and by the time they were done, Samuel actually felt like they had a chance. A small chance, but a chance. Catherine pulled him aside as the men dispersed to their positions. You really think we can win? She asked. I think we can survive. That's enough. Is it? Samuel looked at her, this woman who'd been through hell, and kept walking, and felt his resolve harden. It has to be, he said. They came 3 days later. Samuel was on watch when he spotted them, a line of riders on the eastern ridge silhouetted against the dawn sky. He counted quickly. 15, maybe 16. His heart sank. They're here, he shouted. The ranch exploded into motion. Men grabbed rifles and took positions. Catherine ran for the house. Dutch climbed into the barn loft. Samuel watched the riders descend the ridge, moving slow and deliberate. Clay Morrison rode at the front, his brother beside him. Even from this distance, Samuel could see the rage on their faces. They stopped 100 yards out. "Hartley!" Clay's voice carried across the morning air. "You killed our father!" "Your father died in jail," Samuel shouted back. "I had nothing to do with it." "Liar! You put him there. You destroyed our family, and now we're going to destroy yours. I don't have a family, just a wife and some land." "Not for long." Clay raised his hand. "Last chance. Send out the woman and we'll let you live." Samuel felt Catherine tense beside him at the window. "Go to hell," Samuel said. Clay's hand dropped. The riders charged. Samuel fired his bullet, taking down the lead horse. The animal went down screaming, throwing its rider. Chaos erupted as the line broke around the fallen horse. Gunfire exploded from the ranch rifles cracking from the barn, the house, the bunkhouse. 2 more riders went down, then 3. But they kept coming. Clay reached the first outbuilding and dove behind it, his men scattering for cover. Return fire peppered the ranch house, shattering windows, chewing through wood. "Get down!" Samuel yelled, pulling Catherine to the floor as bullets whined overhead. The battle descended into a brutal stalemate. The Morrison men had numbers and momentum. Samuel's group had defensive positions and better cover. Neither side could advance without taking casualties. For 20 minutes, it was just noise and smoke, and the smell of gunpowder. Samuel fired, reloaded, fired again. His ears rang. His shoulder ached from the rifle's kick. Then he heard the scream. One of Hutchins' men, a kid named Danny, was down clutching his leg. Blood poured through his fingers. "Cover me!" Samuel yelled to Catherine. He ran out into the yard, bullets kicking up dirt around him. He grabbed Danny under the arms and dragged him toward the house. Something hot sliced across his shoulder. Pain exploded up his neck. He kept dragging. Catherine appeared beside him, firing the shotgun. The blast knocked 2 Morrison men off their feet. Together, they got Danny inside. "How bad?" Samuel asked, pressing his hand against the wound. "Bad," Danny gasped. Bones shattered. Catherine tore strips from her dress and started binding the leg. Samuel looked out the window and saw the Morrison men regrouping for another charge. "They're coming again," he said. "How many did we get?" 5 down, maybe 6. "And us, Danny. One of Thomas's men took a bullet to the arm. Everyone else is still fighting." "Samuel," Catherine grabbed his face. "You're bleeding." He touched his shoulder and his hand came away red. "It's nothing. Just a graze." "That's not nothing." "It is compared to what's coming." He kissed her quickly. "Stay with Danny. Keep pressure on that wound." "Where are you going?" "To end this." Before she could stop him, Samuel was out the door. He ran for the barn bullets chasing him. Dutch met him at the door. "What the hell are you doing?" the old man demanded. "I'm going to talk to Clay." "That's suicide." "Maybe. But this has to end before more people die." Samuel looked Dutch in the eye. "If I don't come back, you get Catherine out. Promise me." Dutch's jaw worked. "Son? Promise me." "All right. I promise." Samuel grabbed a white cloth someone's torn shirt and tied it to a broom handle. Then he walked out into the yard, the makeshift flag held high. The shooting stopped. Clay Morrison stood up from behind the water trough, his face twisted with suspicion. "What's this?" "I want to talk," Samuel called out. "Talk? There's nothing to talk about." "Yes, there is. This is between you and me. Not these other men. Not my wife. Just us." Samuel took a step forward. "You want revenge, fine. Take it. But leave everyone else out of it." Clay laughed, ugly and bitter. "You think I give a damn about honor? About fair fights? You took everything from us." Your father took everything from himself. He broke the law. He paid the price. He was my father. Clay's voice cracked. And you put him in that cell. You're why he's dead. Samuel saw it then, not just the rage, but the grief underneath it. Clay Morrison wasn't just angry. He was devastated. I'm sorry, Samuel said, and meant it. I'm sorry your father's dead. I'm sorry about all of it. But killing me won't bring him back. No, but it'll make me feel a hell of a lot better. Clay raised his pistol. Samuel didn't move, didn't run, just stood there with the white flag in his hand and waited for the bullet. It didn't come. Instead, Will Morrison grabbed his brother's arm. Clay, don't. Let go. I said don't. Will's voice was firm. This isn't what Pa would have wanted. Pa's dead. I know, and killing Hartley won't change that. It'll just put us in the ground next to him. Will pulled Clay's gun down. It's over, brother. We lost. No. Yes. Will looked at Samuel, and there was something like respect in his eyes. He won fair. Pa would have respected that. For a long moment, nobody moved. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. Then Clay lowered his gun. Get off my land, Samuel said quietly. Take your men and go. If I see you again, I won't be this generous. Clay's face was a mask of pain and rage, but he nodded once. This isn't over. Yeah, Samuel said. It is. The Morrison brothers mounted up. Their remaining men followed. Within minutes they were gone, leaving only dust and bodies in their wake. Samuel stood in the yard, still holding the white flag, and felt his legs start to shake. Catherine was at his side in an instant. Are you insane? He could have killed you. I know. Then why? Because someone had to stop it, and it had to be me. He pulled her close. It's over now. Really over. She held him tight, and he felt her tears soak through his shirt. Around them, the men started to emerge from cover, checking the wounded, counting the cost. 3 of Morrison's men were dead, 5 more wounded. On Samuel's side, Danny would live, but might never walk right again. 2 others had minor injuries. It could have been so much worse. They spent the rest of the day cleaning up, burying the dead, tending the wounded, repairing what could be repaired. By sunset, the ranch looked like a battlefield, scorched earth, bullet-pocked walls, broken windows. But it was still standing. Hutchins came by that evening to check on his men. You did good, son, he said, gripping Samuel's shoulder. Real good. 3 men are dead because of me. 3 men are dead because Clay Morrison's a fool. Don't carry that weight. Hutchins looked around at the damage. You need help rebuilding. I can't afford. I didn't ask if you could afford it. I asked if you needed it. Samuel felt his throat tighten. Yes, sir, I do. Then you'll have it. Hutchins tipped his hat to Catherine. Ma'am, you take care of this boy. He's got the makings of a good man. I know, Catherine said softly. After Hutchins left, Samuel and Catherine stood on the porch watching the stars come out. You think they'll really leave us alone? Catherine asked. I don't know, but Will seemed like he meant it. And without their father's money, they don't have the resources to keep fighting. So it's really over. I think so. Catherine leaned against him. What now? Samuel looked out at the ranch, damaged but still standing, scarred, but still his. Now, we rebuild. Make this place into something worth all the blood that's been spilled for it. He turned to her. You still want to stay? Are you kidding, after everything we've been through? She laughed. I'm not going anywhere. They went inside together, and for the first time in weeks, Samuel felt like he could breathe. The next month passed in a blur of work. True to his word, Hutchins sent men and materials. The whole county seemed to rally around Samuel, people who'd watched him stand up to the Morrisons and decided he was worth supporting. The barn got a new roof. The fences were repaired. The burned pasture was plowed under and reseeded. Catherine worked as hard as anyone up before dawn and in bed after dark. Samuel would watch her sometimes, hair tied back, face streaked with dirt, hands calloused from hard labor, and feel something so powerful it scared him. Love. Real love. The kind that lasted. One evening about 6 weeks after the fight, Samuel came in from the fields to find Catherine sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. "You all right?" he asked. She looked up and he saw tears on her face. "Catherine, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She stood and took his hands. "Samuel, I'm pregnant." The words hit him like a physical blow. He stood there, mouth open, trying to process what she'd just said. I'm pregnant. About 2 months along, I think." Samuel felt his knees go weak. He sat down hard in the nearest chair. "Say something," Catherine said, her voice uncertain. I don't know what to say." "Are you angry?" "Angry, no." "God, no." He stood and pulled her into his arms. "I'm terrified, and happy, and completely overwhelmed." Catherine laughed through her tears. "Me too." They held each other for a long time, both of them crying now, both of them thinking about what this meant. A baby, a new life, a future that stretched beyond just surviving. "We're going to be parents." Samuel said, the reality of it finally sinking in. "Yes." "I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither do I." Catherine pulled back and looked at him. "But we'll figure it out. Together." "Together," Samuel echoed. That night, lying in bed with Catherine curled against him, Samuel stared at the ceiling and thought about his father. About the legacy he'd left. About what it meant to be a man. His father had worked himself to death trying to hold on to this land. Had sacrificed everything for it. But Samuel realized now that the land wasn't the legacy. The work wasn't the legacy. The legacy was choosing to stand when the world told you to run. Choosing mercy when revenge would be easier. Choosing love when fear tried to win. That was what his father had really left him. And that was what he'd pass on to his child. The winter came hard that year. Snow fell early and often burying the prairie under 3 feet of white. The cattle huddled in the shelter Samuel and Dutch had built. The house creaked under the weight of ice, but inside there was warmth. Catherine's belly grew as the months passed. She moved slower now, more careful, one hand always resting on the swell of new life. Samuel found himself constantly worried about her health, about the baby, about whether he'd be a good father. Catherine would catch him staring sometimes and laugh. "Stop worrying," she'd say. "Women have been doing this for thousands of years." "Not my woman." "Your woman is tougher than you think." She was right, of course. Catherine was the strongest person he knew, but that didn't stop him from worrying. In late February, the pains started. Samuel was in the barn when Dutch came running. "It's time." "Time for what?" "The baby. Catherine's having the baby." Samuel's mind went blank. Then he was running for the house, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst. Catherine was in the bedroom, bent over the bed, breathing hard. "Samuel," she gasped. "Get Mrs. Henderson." "I'm not leaving you." "You have to. I need her. Please." Samuel rode to the Henderson place faster than he'd ever ridden in his life. Mrs. Henderson was ready. She'd been expecting this call for weeks, and they were back at the ranch within the hour. Then came the waiting. Samuel paced the kitchen while Mrs. Henderson worked upstairs. Dutch tried to distract him with talk of spring planting, but Samuel couldn't focus. All he could hear were Catherine's screams. Hours passed. The sun set. Night fell. And still the screams continued. Samuel was on the verge of breaking down the bedroom door when he heard a different sound. A baby's cry. He was up the stairs before he realized he was moving. Mrs. Henderson met him at the door, smiling. "You have a son." Samuel pushed past her. Catherine lay in the bed, exhausted and pale but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in cloth. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Samuel crossed the room on shaking legs. He looked down at the baby, red-faced and squalling hands, balled into tiny fists, and felt his whole world shift. "He's perfect," Samuel whispered. "He is." Catherine looked up at him. "What should we name him?" Samuel thought about his father, about the man who'd raised him to stand for something, to fight for what was right. "William," he said, "after my father." Catherine smiled. "William Hartley, I like that." Samuel sat on the edge of the bed and carefully took his son. The baby quieted in his arms, tiny eyes blinking up at him. "Hello, William," Samuel said. "Welcome to the world. It's going to be hard sometimes, scary sometimes, but your mother and I will be here, always." The baby made a small sound, not quite a cry, not quite a coo, and Samuel felt tears streaming down his face. "You're crying," Catherine said. "I know." "Why? Because I'm happy, because I'm terrified, because I love you both so much it hurts." He looked at her. "Thank you." "For what?" "For choosing me, for staying, for giving me this." Catherine reached up and touched his face. "You gave me just as much. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to stop running." They sat there together, husband and wife and newborn son, while the winter wind howled outside and the fire crackled in the hearth. The ranch had cost them blood and pain and nearly their lives. But sitting there with his family, Samuel knew it was worth every drop. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought new life with it. The snow melted, the grass grew green, the cattle that had survived the winter grew fat on fresh grazing, and baby William grew too, from a tiny, fragile thing to a robust infant with his father's eyes and his mother's determination. Samuel had never known exhaustion like this. Between the ranch work and the sleepless nights with a crying baby, he was running on fumes. But he'd also never known joy like this. Watching Catherine nurse their son, hearing William's first laugh, seeing him reach for Samuel's finger and grip it with surprising strength. These were the moments that made everything worth it. One evening in early May, Samuel stood on the porch with William in his arms while Catherine prepared dinner. "You see all this?" Samuel said to his son, gesturing at the land. "This is yours someday, your inheritance. But not just the land. The principles behind it. The idea that you stand for what's right even when it costs you everything." William gurgled in response. Samuel laughed. "Yeah, you don't care about that now, but someday you will. And when that day comes, I hope I've taught you well enough to make the right choices." "He will," Catherine said from the doorway, "because he has you for a father." Samuel turned to her. "And you for a mother. That's even more important." She came out and stood beside him, all three of them looking out at the land as the sun set. "Do you ever think about the Morrisons?" Catherine asked quietly. "Sometimes. Wonder where they ended up. If they ever found peace." "Do you think they'll come back?" "No." Samuel was surprised to find he meant it. "I think they're done. I think everyone's done fighting." "Good." Catherine leaned against him. "I'm tired of fighting." "Me too." They stood there until full dark, a family united against whatever the world might throw at them. The ranch had been baptized in fire and blood, had been fought for and nearly lost a dozen times over. But it was theirs now, really truly theirs, and nothing and no one would ever take it from them again. Samuel was wrong about the Morrisons being done. He realized it 3 months later when Dutch came riding in from town, his face grim as death. "Will Morrison's back," Dutch said, dismounting heavily. "Saw him at the general store this morning." Samuel felt ice spread through his chest. Was Clay with him? No, just Will, and he looked different, older, broken maybe. Catherine appeared in the doorway, William on her hip. What did he want? Don't know. He bought supplies and left. Didn't talk to anyone. Dutch looked at Samuel. But people are nervous, wondering if trouble's coming again. Samuel set down the fence post he'd been carrying. Did he threaten anyone? No, that's what's strange. He just bought his goods and rode out. Polite even. Where'd he go? North, toward the old Morrison place. Samuel and Catherine exchanged glances. The Morrison ranch had been abandoned since Jake's arrest. The bank had seized it for unpaid debts, but nobody wanted to buy property with that much blood attached to it. Maybe he's just trying to salvage what's left, Catherine said, but her voice was uncertain. Maybe. Samuel didn't believe it. Or maybe he's planning something. That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. He lay in bed listening to William's soft breathing from the cradle beside them and Catherine's steady rhythm next to him, but his mind wouldn't settle. Around 2 a.m, he gave up and went downstairs. He was sitting at the kitchen table when he heard the knock. Samuel grabbed his rifle and moved to the door. Who's there? It's Will Morrison. Samuel's blood went cold. He glanced back at the stairs, making sure Catherine hadn't come down, then opened the door a crack. Will stood on the porch alone, hands raised to show he was unarmed. He looked terrible gaunt, hollow-eyed like he'd aged 10 years in the past few months. What do you want? Samuel asked. To talk. Just talk. I swear I'm not here for trouble. You'll forgive me if I don't believe you. I understand, but I need 5 minutes, please. Something in Will's voice made Samuel hesitate. It wasn't the rage he'd heard before. It was exhaustion, defeat. You try anything. I won't. You have my word. Samuel stepped back and let him in, rifle still trained on him. Talk. Will stood in the kitchen, hat in his hands, looking around at the home Samuel and Catherine had built. You got a kid now, I heard. What's it to you? Nothing, just making conversation. Will shifted his weight. Clay's dead. The words hit Samuel like a punch. What? He's dead. Got himself killed in a bar fight 2 months ago. Some drifter took exception to something Clay said and put a knife in him. Will's voice was flat. Died right there on the floor. Didn't even make it out the door. Samuel lowered the rifle slightly. I'm sorry. Are you? Yes. Whatever else he was your brother. Will looked at him, then really looked at him, and Samuel saw tears in the man's eyes. He was all I had left. Pa's gone. Ma died years ago. Clay was it, and now he's gone too. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know it's over. Really over. Will pulled something from his pocket, a piece of paper. This is the deed to the Morrison Ranch. What's left of it. I want you to have it. Samuel stared at him. What? I'm leaving. Going east. Maybe California. Somewhere nobody knows the Morrison name. I can't stay here. Too many ghosts. Will set the deed on the table. The land borders yours on the north. It's not much, most of it's played out, but it's yours if you want it. I can't take your land. Why not? It's worthless to me, and you're the only man in this county who had the guts to stand up to my family. You earned it. Samuel looked at the deed, then back at Will. This doesn't feel right. Nothing about the last year feels right. But this is me trying to make something right before I go. Will put his hat back on. I'm sorry, Hartley. For all of it. For what my father did. For what Clay and I did. You didn't deserve any of it. Neither did you, Samuel said quietly. You got caught up in your father's mess. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it I rode with them? Burned your pasture. Tried to run you off your land. Will's voice cracked. I'm as guilty as they were. Maybe, but you also stopped Clay from killing me. That counts for something. Will nodded, unable to speak. He turned toward the door, then stopped. You got a good woman, a good kid. Don't waste it chasing things that don't matter. I watched my father spend his whole life chasing land and money and power, and all it got him was a cell and a grave. He looked back at Samuel. Be better than that. Be better than us. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night. Samuel stood there holding the deed and feeling like the world had just shifted on its axis. Catherine came down the stairs in her nightgown, eyes heavy with sleep. Who was that? Will Morrison. She was wide awake instantly. What did he want? Samuel showed her the deed. He gave us his land. What? Why? Because his brother's dead and he's leaving. Said he wanted to make something right before he went. Catherine took the deed and read it, her lips moving silently. This doubles our holdings. I know. Samuel, we could actually make something of this place now. Run more cattle, maybe even hire some hands. I know. But Samuel's voice was hollow. Catherine looked at him. What's wrong? This is good news. Is it? We got this land because Jake Morrison destroyed himself and his sons. We built our happiness on top of their destruction. No. We built our happiness on our choices. Their destruction came from their own choices. Catherine took his hands. You didn't make Jake Morrison into what he was. You didn't force Clay to burn our pasture, or Will to ride with him. They made their choices, just like we made ours. I know, but it still feels wrong. Then let's make it right. Let's use this land to build something good, something that honors your father and our son and everything we've fought for. She squeezed his hands. We can't change the past, but we can choose what we do with the future. Samuel looked at her and felt the weight start to lift. She was right. She was always right. All right, he said. We'll take the land, and we'll make something worth having. They went back to bed, but Samuel lay awake for hours thinking about Will Morrison, riding off into the dark alone and broken, carrying the weight of his family's sins. It could have been him, if he'd made different choices, if he'd let fear win over principle, if he'd run instead of standing. That was the real inheritance his father had left him. Not land, not money, but the knowledge that the choices you made defined who you were. And Samuel had chosen well. The next 6 months transformed everything. With the Morrison land added to his own, Samuel now controlled over 1,500 acres. It was more than he could work alone, so he hired 3 ranch hands. Good men recommended by Hutchins, who knew cattle and weren't afraid of hard work. The herds grew. The pastures filled. Money that had been so scarce before started flowing in steadily. By the time William turned 1, the ranch was finally profitable. Samuel marked the occasion by taking Catherine and the baby into town for a proper celebration. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, the first time either of them had eaten anywhere but their own kitchen in over a year. William was fussy through the whole meal, squirming in Catherine's arms and reaching for everything on the table. But Catherine just laughed and bounced him on her knee while Samuel cut her food so she could eat one-handed. I can't remember the last time I wore a dress that wasn't covered in dirt, Catherine said, smoothing the fabric of her new blue dress. You look beautiful. I look tired. You look beautiful and tired. Samuel reached across the table and took her free hand. Thank you. For what? For staying. For believing in me. For giving me a family. His voice went thick. For saving my life. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. You saved mine first. Then I guess we're even. No. She squeezed his hand. We're better than even. We're home. After dinner, they walked down Main Street with William between them, each holding one of his tiny hands as he toddled along on unsteady legs. People nodded and smiled as they passed. Some stopped to congratulate Samuel on the success of his ranch. The Hartley name meant something now, something good. They were heading back to the wagon when Samuel saw a familiar figure sitting on the bench outside the general store. Dutch. But not the Dutch Samuel knew. This man looked ancient, his face gray, his breathing labored. "Dutch," Samuel hurried over. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just tired is all." But Dutch's hand was pressed to his chest, and Samuel saw the pain in his eyes. "Catherine, take William to the wagon. I'll be right there." Once they were gone, Samuel sat beside Dutch. "How long have you been feeling like this?" "Couple weeks, maybe longer." Dutch waved it off. "Don't fuss, I'm just old." "You need to see a doctor." "Doctors can't fix old, son." "Dutch, I'm dying, Samuel." Dutch said it plain and simple, like he was talking about the weather. "My heart's giving out. Has been for months. I just wanted to see you settled before I went." Samuel felt his throat close up. "You're not dying. You're just tired." "I'm both." Dutch looked at him with something like affection. "You did good, boy. Your father would be proud. Hell, I'm proud." "Don't talk like this." "Got to. Don't have much time left." Dutch reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather pouch. "This is yours now." "What is it?" "Your grandfather's watch. Your father gave it to me for safekeeping years ago. Said to give it to you when you became a man." Dutch pressed it into Samuel's hand. "I'd say that day's come and gone." Samuel opened the pouch. Inside was a silver pocket watch, tarnished with age but still ticking. He opened it and saw an inscription on the inside. "To William Hartley Sr. from his father, 1846. May you always know what time it is." "I don't understand," Samuel said. "Your great-grandfather was a practical man. Didn't go in for flowery sayings. But what he meant was this: may you always know when to act and when to wait, when to fight and when to walk away, when to hold on and when to let go." Dutch closed Samuel's fingers around the watch. "You've learned all that now. You're ready." "Ready for what?" "To be who you're meant to be. A father. A husband. A man who stands for something." Samuel's eyes burned. "I'm not ready to lose you." "Nobody ever is. But that's life, boy. People come and go. What matters is what you do with the time you're given." Dutch stood slowly, wincing. "Now get on home. Your wife and kid are waiting." Samuel stood too. "Come back to the ranch. Let Catherine take care of you." "No. I'm going to go home and die in my own bed like a man should." Dutch held out his hand. "It's been an honor working for your family, Samuel. Your grandfather. Your father. And you." Samuel ignored the hand and pulled Dutch into a hug. The old man felt frail in his arms, like he might break. "Thank you," Samuel whispered, "for everything." "You're welcome, boy. Now let me go before I start crying like a fool." Samuel released him and watched as Dutch walked slowly toward his horse. The old foreman mounted with difficulty, then turned back one last time. "Love that woman of yours. Love that kid. And don't waste a single day. Bim bim." He tipped his hat. "That's all that matters in the end." Then he rode off into the gathering dusk. Samuel never saw him again. Dead. Dutch died 3 days later, alone in his small cabin on the edge of town. The doctor said his heart just stopped peaceful and quiet in his sleep. They buried him next to Samuel's father because that's what Dutch had wanted. The whole county turned out for the funeral. Men who'd worked with Dutch, families he'd helped over the years. Even John Hutchins, who rarely left his ranch, came to pay his respects. Samuel stood at the graveside holding William while Catherine gripped his arm. He tried to speak, tried to say something about what Dutch had meant to him, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, Hutchins stepped forward and did it for him. "Dutch was a good man," Hutchins said simply. "Honest, loyal, fair. He worked hard and never complained. He stood by the Hartley family for 30 years and never once wavered." He looked at Samuel. This boy here is proof of that. Dutch helped raise him, taught him, made him into the man he is today. We should all be so lucky to leave that kind of legacy." People murmured agreement. Samuel blinked back tears. After the funeral, Mrs. Henderson approached with a covered dish. "I made stew. Thought you might want something for dinner tonight." "Thank you, ma'am." "Dutch spoke highly of you, Samuel. Said you reminded him of your father." She patted his arm. "That's about the highest compliment a man can get." She walked away, and Samuel stood there holding his son and feeling the weight of generations on his shoulders. His great-grandfather who'd built a life from nothing. His grandfather who'd claimed the land. His father who'd worked it until it killed him. And Dutch who'd been there through all of it holding the family together. Now it was Samuel's turn to carry that weight forward. "You all right?" Catherine asked softly. "No, but I will be." They walked to the wagon together. William had fallen asleep against Samuel's shoulder, exhausted from the day. Samuel looked down at his son's peaceful face and felt something settle in his chest. This was why it all mattered. Not the land, not the money, not the reputation. The next generation. The chance to pass something good forward. "Let's go home," he said. That fall, Catherine told him she was pregnant again. Samuel's reaction was different this time. Less terror, more joy. He'd learned with William that he could do this, that they could do this together. "Boy or girl?" He asked, his hand resting on her still flat belly. "Does it matter?" "No, just curious." "Girl," Catherine said with certainty. "I can feel it." She was right. Sarah Hartley was born in early March during a late snowstorm. Unlike William, who'd been a difficult birth, Sarah came quickly and easily. One minute Catherine was having contractions, the next Mrs. Henderson was handing Samuel a tiny, perfect daughter. "She looks like you," Samuel said, studying Sarah's delicate features. "Poor thing," Catherine said, but she was smiling. William, now nearly 2, was less impressed with his new sister. He'd peer into the cradle, poke her experimentally, then toddle off to find something more interesting. "He'll warm up to her," Catherine assured Samuel. "And if he doesn't, then we'll have 2 kids who fight constantly like every other family in Wyoming." She laughed. "We'll survive." They did more than survive. They thrived. The ranch continued to grow. Samuel added another pasture, bought more cattle, built a second barn. The Hartley brand became known throughout the territory as a mark of quality. And the family grew too. William learned to talk in full sentences, mostly asking why about everything he saw. Sarah proved to have her mother's fierce temperament, screaming when she didn't get her way, and charming everyone when she did. Samuel watched them grow and felt something he'd never quite felt before: contentment. Not happiness exactly. Happiness came and went. But contentment, the deep satisfaction of knowing you were exactly where you were meant to be, that was something else entirely. One evening in late summer, Samuel sat on the porch watching Catherine play with the kids in the yard. William was teaching Sarah to throw a ball, though at 7 months she was more interested in eating it than throwing it. Catherine caught him watching and smiled. "What are you thinking about? How lucky I am." "That's sappy." "I know, but it's true." He stood and walked down to where they were playing. 3 years ago I was 19 and alone and about to lose everything. Now I have you, I have them, I have a ranch that actually works. I have a life. Catherine stood and wrapped her arms around him. "You built that life. Nobody gave it to you." "We built it, together." "Together," she agreed. William tugged on Samuel's pants. "Papa, why is the sky blue?" Samuel laughed. "That's a complicated question, son." "But why?" "Because." Samuel thought about it. "Because that's just how it is. Some things don't need complicated answers." Catherine smiled at him over William's head, and Samuel realized that was true about more than just the sky. Some things, love, family, home, didn't need complicated answers. They just were. And that was enough. The trouble started again in early September. Samuel was in town picking up supplies when he overheard two men talking outside the saloon. "Heard there's railroad surveyors coming through next month." "What for?" "New line. Going to run from Cheyenne to Montana. Word is they're buying up land for right-of-way." Samuel's stomach dropped. "Excuse me, did you say railroad?" The men turned. One of them nodded. "Yeah, big operation. They're offering top dollar for any land they need." "Where's the line going?" "Don't know exactly, but rumor is it cuts right through this valley." Samuel felt cold spread through his chest. "Through the valley." "That's what I heard. But you know how rumors are. Probably nothing to worry about." Samuel finished his shopping in a daze and rode home faster than he should have. Catherine was hanging laundry when he arrived. She took one look at his face, and her smile faded. "What happened?" He told her about the railroad. Catherine set down the laundry basket slowly. "They can't just take our land, can they?" "If it's for public use, yeah, they can. It's called eminent domain." Samuel paced the yard. "We could fight it, maybe, but the railroad has more money and more lawyers than we'll ever have." "So, what do we do?" "I don't know." Samuel stopped pacing and looked at her. "I just got this place stable. We just started building something real. And now they might take it all away." "We don't know that yet. It's just rumors." "Rumors usually have some truth to them." Catherine came to him and took his hands. "Then we wait. We see what happens. And if they do come for our land, we fight. Just like we've fought everything else." "I'm tired of fighting." "I know. So am I. But we're good at it." She smiled, but her eyes were worried. "We'll figure it out." That night, Samuel sat in his father's old chair with Sarah asleep on his chest, and William curled against his side. Catherine was across from him, mending a shirt by lamplight. This was his life now, his family, his home, and he'd be damned if he was going to let anyone take it from him. Not the Morrisons, not the railroad, not anyone. He'd spent 3 years fighting to build this life. He'd keep fighting for however long it took, because some things were worth any cost. And this family, this home, this hard-won peace was worth everything. The railroad surveyors arrived 2 weeks later. Samuel was repairing the north fence when he saw them, 3 men in suits riding in a fancy carriage, accompanied by a dozen workers with surveying equipment. He rode out to meet them. The lead surveyor was a thin man with spectacles and a clipboard. "Mr. Hartley." "That's me." "My name is Charles Whitmore. I represent the Wyoming and Montana Railroad Company. We're surveying for a new line through this region." "I heard. Does it go through my land?" Whitmore consulted his clipboard. "Parts of it, yes. We'll need approximately 200 acres for the right-of-way, including a portion of your northern pasture." 200 acres. Samuel felt sick. "What if I don't want to sell?" "Then we'll initiate eminent domain proceedings. But I'd strongly advise against that. The process is lengthy and expensive, and the outcome is predetermined. You'd spend thousands in legal fees only to get the same result." Whitmore smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're prepared to offer you fair market value plus 20%. That's a generous offer." Generous. Samuel's hands tightened on his reins. "You're taking land my family's owned for 40 years, land we fought and bled for, and you call that generous." "I understand your frustration, Mr. Hartley, but progress is inevitable. The railroad will benefit everyone in the territory, including you." "How exactly does it benefit me to lose 200 acres? You'll have easy access to markets. You can ship your cattle east at a fraction of the current cost. Your land value will increase substantially." Whitmore adjusted his spectacles. "In 5 years you'll wonder why you ever opposed this." Samuel wanted to hit him, wanted to drag him off that fancy carriage and show him what it really meant to work land to build something from nothing. But violence wouldn't help. It never did. "How long do I have to decide?" Samuel asked through gritted teeth. 30 days. After that, we begin legal proceedings." Whitmore tipped his hat. "Good day, Mr. Hartley." They rode off, leaving Samuel sitting on his horse in the middle of his land, feeling like the ground was disappearing beneath him. When he got home and told Catherine, she went pale. 200 acres, plus buildings. They want to run the line right through where the north barn is. Can we stop them? No, not legally. Samuel slumped in his chair. We can fight it, drag it out in court. But Whitmore's right, we'll lose eventually and be broke doing it. Catherine sat across from him thinking. What if we negotiate, ask for more money? Different route. They won't change the route. Too expensive, and more money doesn't help if we can't run the ranch properly without that land. So we're just supposed to accept this. I don't know. Samuel put his head in his hands. I don't know what to do. They sat in silence while the clock ticked and the kids played outside, oblivious to their parents' worry. Finally, Catherine spoke. Your father always said the measure of a man wasn't in how he handled success. It was in how he handled loss. Samuel looked up. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we can't stop this, but we can choose how we respond to it. She leaned forward. We take their money. We use it to buy more land somewhere else. We rebuild. We adapt. That feels like giving up. No. Giving up is walking away from ranching entirely. This is just changing direction. Catherine took his hands. We've done it before. We can do it again. Samuel wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all. But he knew she was right. Sometimes you couldn't win by fighting. Sometimes you won by surviving and adapting and refusing to let circumstances break you. All right, he said finally. We negotiate the best deal we can, and then we figure out what comes next. Catherine squeezed his hands. Together. Together. Outside, William was chasing Sarah around the yard while she shrieked with laughter. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. Samuel watched his children play and felt his resolve harden. The railroad might take his land, but it couldn't take what really mattered. His family, his principles, his refusal to break. Those were his real inheritance, and nobody could ever take them away. Samuel spent the next 3 weeks negotiating with the railroad company. It was exhausting work. Every meeting felt like pulling teeth. Whitmore and his lawyers had answers for everything, always circling back to the same point: the railroad was coming, whether Samuel liked it or not. But Samuel didn't give up. He pushed for better compensation. He demanded they reroute around the barn. He insisted on access roads so his remaining land wouldn't be cut off. Catherine sat beside him through every meeting, asking sharp questions that often caught the railroad men off guard. More than once, Samuel saw Whitmore's frustration when Catherine picked apart his arguments with simple logic. Your husband's lucky to have you, Whitmore said, after one particularly contentious session. No, Catherine replied coolly. I'm lucky to have him. He's the one who taught me not to back down. They finally reached an agreement on a cold October morning. The railroad would pay double market value plus cover all relocation costs. They'd reroute to spare the barn. And they'd build 2 access roads at their expense. It wasn't enough. Not really. But it was the best they could do. Samuel signed the papers with a hand that shook from anger more than nerves. When it was done, he walked out of the lawyer's office and stood on the street feeling like he'd just sold a piece of his soul. Catherine found him there an hour later, staring at nothing. It's done, he said flatly. I know. 200 acres, gone, just like that. Not gone, repurposed. Catherine took his arm. And we have enough money now to buy land twice as good. Hutchins told me there's property available west of here. Better water, better grazing. It won't be our land, not the land my grandfather claimed. No, but it'll be the land we claim, the land our children grow up on. She turned him to face her. Samuel, listen to me. Your grandfather built something from nothing. Your father maintained it. You've defended it. And now you're going to do what neither of them could. You're going to adapt and grow beyond it. That's not what they would have wanted. Maybe not. But they didn't live in a world with railroads cutting through their property. You do. and you're handling it the only way you can with dignity and intelligence instead of stubborn pride." Catherine's voice was fierce. "That's not weakness. That's strength." Samuel wanted to believe her, but the grief sat heavy in his chest like a stone. They rode home in silence, and Samuel spent the rest of the day walking the land that would soon belong to the railroad. He memorized every hill, every creek bend, every stand of trees, tried to hold on to it before it was gone. That evening, he found William in the barn, trying to saddle a horse by himself. "What are you doing, son?" "I'm going to ride out and tell the railroad men to go away," William said with all the fierce determination of a 4-year-old. "This is our land. They can't have it." Samuel's throat tightened. He knelt beside his son. "I wish it was that easy." "Why can't we just fight them? You fought the bad men before." "Sometimes fighting isn't the answer. Sometimes you have to accept what you can't change and find a new way forward." "But that's not fair." "No, it's not." Samuel pulled William into his arms. "But life isn't always fair. What matters is how you respond when unfair things happen. Do you give up, get bitter, or do you keep going and build something new?" William was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Build something new. That's right. Will it be as good as this place? I don't know, but we'll make it as good as we can." Samuel looked his son in the eye. "And someday when you're grown and have kids of your own, you'll tell them about how their great-great-grandfather claimed this land, and how their great-grandfather defended it, and how their grandfather had the courage to let it go and build something better. That's our real legacy. Not land. Courage." William hugged him tight. "I love you, Papa. I love you too, son." The actual land transfer happened in November. Samuel watched the railroad crews move in with their equipment and their stakes and their maps. They were efficient and professional, treating his land like it was just another piece of ground to measure and claim. It took everything he had not to ride out there and tell them to get off his property. But it wasn't his property anymore. Catherine kept him busy by dragging him to look at new land. They rode out west with Hutchins, who showed them several promising parcels. The best one was 1,000 acres bordering a year-round stream with good grass and natural windbreaks. It cost more than Samuel wanted to spend, but Catherine convinced him it was worth it. "This isn't giving up," she said, standing in the middle of the empty land. "This is starting over, and starting over takes more courage than holding on." Samuel looked around at the unfamiliar landscape. It wasn't his grandfather's land, wasn't his father's, but it could be his. "All right," he said, "we'll take it." They bought the land in December and spent the winter planning. Samuel hired more hands to help with the move. Catherine organized everything else, which buildings to dismantle and rebuild, which cattle to move first, which supplies they'd need. By spring, they were ready. The actual move took 3 weeks. Samuel had never worked so hard in his life. Every day was 16 hours of loading wagons driving cattle, rebuilding fences. His hands bled, his back screamed, but he kept going because stopping meant thinking and thinking meant grieving. Catherine worked just as hard managing the household during the day and tending to the kids at night. Sarah was teething and cranky. William wanted to help, but mostly got in the way. Yet somehow, Catherine kept everything running smoothly. One night after the kids were finally asleep, Samuel found her sitting on the porch of their temporary cabin, staring at the stars. "You all right?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Tired, but yes." She leaned against him. Same." He was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about my father, about how he worked himself to death trying to hold on to that land. And here I am, letting it go." "You're not letting it go. You're choosing something better for your family. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." Catherine took his hand. "Your father didn't have a choice. The land was all he had. But you have options. You have resources. You have me and the kids. You're not abandoning his legacy. You're evolving it." Samuel squeezed her hand. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just finally started listening. He laughed the first real laugh in weeks and pulled her close. They sat there under the stars, exhausted and uncertain, but together, and Samuel realized something. Maybe Catherine was right. Maybe this wasn't the end of his father's legacy. Maybe it was the beginning of his own.
Chapter 8.
By June, the new ranch was operational. It wasn't pretty yet. Half the fences were temporary. The barn was barely finished, and the house was smaller than their old one, but it worked. The cattle were healthy, the grass was good, and slowly, carefully, they were building something new. Samuel was repairing the corral fence one morning when a rider approached. He tensed, then relaxed when he recognized John Hutchins. "Morning, John." "Morning." Hutchins dismounted and looked around. "Place is coming together." "Slowly, too slowly. These things take time." Hutchins leaned against the fence. "I wanted to tell you something. The railroad approached me last month. Wanted to buy some of my land, too." Samuel's stomach dropped. "What did you tell them?" "I told them no." Hutchins smiled slightly. "They offered good money. Better than good. But I told them no." "Why?" "Because I watched you these past months. Watched you negotiate and compromise and rebuild. And I realized something. You're a better man than I am." Hutchins met his eyes. "Most men would have gotten bitter. Would have fought until they lost everything. But you adapted. You changed. And you did it without losing yourself." Samuel didn't know what to say. "Your father would be proud," Hutchins continued. "And more than that, he'd be impressed. Because you did something he never could. You let go. Doesn't feel like something to be proud of. That's because you're too close to it. Give it 10 years. You'll see." Hutchins held out his hand. "You need anything, lumber hands advice, you let me know." Samuel shook his hand. "Thank you, John." After Hutchins left, Samuel stood there thinking about what he'd said. About adaptation and change and letting go. Maybe the old man was right. Maybe in 10 years this would all make sense. But right now, it just felt like loss. The turning point came in late summer. Samuel was in town buying supplies when he overheard a conversation that stopped him cold. "Did you hear about the Morrison place?" "No, what about it?" "Railroad bought it. Whole thing. They're using it for the main depot and switching yard." Samuel felt something twist in his chest. The Morrison Ranch, the land that had caused so much pain and blood and suffering, was now a railroad yard. He rode home in a daze and found Catherine in the garden with the kids. "The railroad bought the Morrison place," he said. Catherine looked up, dirt on her hands. "I heard. Mrs. Henderson mentioned it yesterday." "Doesn't that bother you? That place was at the center of everything. All the fighting, all the death, and now it's just gone, paved over and forgotten." "Good," Catherine said simply. "Good?" "Yes, good. That place was poisoned by what happened there. Better that it becomes something useful than stay empty and haunted." She stood and wiped her hands on her apron. "And it proves you made the right choice. You could have fought the railroad like Jake Morrison would have. But instead, you negotiated and moved on. Now you're building something new while the Morrison legacy gets buried under railroad tracks." Samuel stared at her, and something clicked into place in his mind. She was right. The Morrisons had fought and lost everything. Samuel had compromised and kept what mattered. "I've been thinking about this all wrong," he said slowly. "How so?" "I've been mourning the land. But land is just dirt and grass. What matters is what you build on it. The family, the life, the principles." He looked at Catherine, then at William and Sarah playing in the dirt. "We didn't lose anything important. We just changed locations." Catherine smiled. "Took you long enough to figure that out." "I'm slow sometimes." "Yes, you are." She kissed him. "But you get there eventually." That night, Samuel sat on the porch of their new house with his grandfather's watch in his hand. He opened it and read the inscription again. "May you always know what time it is." He finally understood what his great-grandfather meant. Knowing what time it was didn't mean knowing the hour. It meant knowing when to hold on and when to let go, when to fight and when to compromise, when to stand firm and when to bend. His grandfather's time was for claiming land. His father's time was for defending it. And Samuel's time was for evolving it. Each generation had its own battles to fight, its own lessons to learn, and Samuel had learned his. Five years passed. The new ranch thrived. Samuel expanded the herd, built a proper house, and established himself as one of the most successful ranchers in the western part of the territory. The railroad that had seemed like a disaster became an asset. He could ship cattle to market faster and cheaper than ever before. William grew into a serious boy who loved working with the cattle. Sarah turned into a wild child who climbed trees and refused to wear dresses. Catherine had another baby, a boy they named Thomas, after Dutch's real name. Life was good. Better than good. One afternoon in early fall, Samuel was teaching William to rope when a familiar figure rode up. Will Morrison. Samuel hadn't seen him in 5 years. The man looked better, heavier, healthier, with color in his face instead of that hollow-eyed look. "Samuel," Will said, dismounting. "Will." Samuel kept his voice neutral. "What brings you back?" "Heard you did well for yourself. New ranch, growing operation." Will smiled slightly. "Wanted to see it for myself." "Why?" "Because I needed to know." Will took off his hat. "I left here 5 years ago, thinking the Morrison name was finished, that everything we'd built was gone. But you know what I learned out in California?" "What?" "That land doesn't make a legacy. Choices do." Will looked around at the ranch. "You lost 200 acres to the railroad. Could have gotten bitter. Could have fought and lost everything like my father did. But instead you adapted. You built something new. And you did it without compromising who you are." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "Why are you really here, Will?" "To apologize. For all of it. For what my family did to yours. For the pain we caused. For—" His voice cracked. "For everything." "You already apologized. 5 years ago." "I know, but I needed to do it again. Needed you to know that I spent these 5 years becoming someone different. Someone better." Will held out his hand. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledgement that I tried to change." Samuel looked at the hand, then at Will's face. He saw genuine remorse there. Genuine change. He shook Will's hand. "I believe you." "Thank you." Will let go and put his hat back on. "I won't take up any more of your time. Just wanted you to know." He started to mount his horse, then stopped. "One more thing. That deed I gave you, the Morrison land, I heard the railroad paid you well for it." "They did." "Good. I'm glad something good came from all that mess." Will tipped his hat. "Take care of yourself, Samuel, and your family." He rode off, and Samuel stood there watching until he disappeared over the ridge. Catherine came out and stood beside him. "Was that Will Morrison?" "Yeah." "What did he want?" "To apologize, and to see that we were all right." "Are we?" Samuel looked at his wife, then at his son practicing his roping, then at the ranch they'd built together from compromise and courage. "Yeah," he said. "We are." 10 years after his father died, Samuel stood at the grave with William, now 14, beside him. "Tell me about Grandpa," William said. Samuel was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. "He was a hard man, fair. He worked this land until it killed him. He believed in holding on to what was his no matter the cost." Was he right? For his time, yes. But times change. His way doesn't work for every situation. "What's your way, Papa?" Samuel put his hand on his son's shoulder. "My way is to know when to hold on and when to let go. To adapt without losing your principles. To build something that lasts, not because you refuse to change, but because you know how to change without losing yourself. William thought about that. That sounds harder than Grandpa's way. It is, but it's also more honest. They stood there in silence for a while, father and son honoring the man who'd started it all. Then William spoke again. "Papa, when I inherit the ranch, what should my way be?" Samuel smiled. "That's for you to figure out, son. Every generation has to find their own answer." He squeezed William's shoulder. "But whatever you choose, make sure it's based on courage, not fear. On principles, not pride. On love, not obligation. Like you did. Like I tried to do. I didn't always succeed. Made plenty of mistakes. But I tried." "That's enough, though, right? Trying." Samuel looked at his son and felt his chest tighten with emotion. "Yeah, that's enough." They walked back to the wagon where Catherine waited with Sarah and Thomas. The new ranch house was visible in the distance, solid and strong, built on land they'd chosen rather than inherited. Catherine took Samuel's hand as they drove home. "You all right?" "Better than all right." He looked at his family, his wife, his children, his life, and felt a peace he'd never quite felt before. "I finally understand what my great-grandfather meant, about knowing what time it is. And what time is it? Time to be grateful. Time to appreciate what we built. Time to teach our children that real strength isn't about holding on, it's about knowing when to let go and build something new." Catherine leaned against him. "Your father would be proud." "Maybe. Or maybe he'd think I was a fool for giving up the family land." "Does it matter what he'd think?" Samuel considered that. "No, not anymore. I did what I thought was right. That's all any man can do." As they pulled up to the house, William jumped down and ran ahead with Sarah chasing after him. Thomas gurgled in Catherine's arms. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Samuel sat for a moment, taking it all in. The ranch they'd built, the family they'd raised, the life they'd created from ashes and compromise and sheer stubborn will. He thought about his grandfather claiming land from wilderness, his father defending it against all comers, and himself learning that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was change direction. 3 generations. 3 different ways of being strong. And Samuel's children would find a 4th way, and their children a 5th, and on until the Hartley name meant something beyond just land and cattle and stubborn pride. It would mean adaptation, evolution, the courage to change without losing yourself. That was the real legacy. Not the land his grandfather claimed, or the battles his father fought, but the principle that strength came from knowing when to stand, and when to move, when to fight, and when to compromise, when to hold on, and when to let go. Samuel climbed down from the wagon and helped Catherine with the baby. Together they walked into their house, not the house his grandfather built or his father died defending, but the house they'd built together with railroad money and sweat and the determination to create something new from the ruins of what came before. The door closed behind them, and for the first time in 10 years, Samuel felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not because he'd held on to the past, but because he'd had the courage to let it go and build something better. And that he realized was what his father had really wanted all along. Not for Samuel to defend the family land unto death, but to defend the family principles unto life. To stand for something when the world called it weakness. To show mercy when revenge would be easier. To choose love when fear tried to win. To adapt when stubbornness would lead to ruin. To build when others would break. To keep going when giving up seemed smarter. That was the Hartley legacy. That was what would survive long after the land was gone and the buildings had crumbled and everyone who'd known his name was dead. The principle, the courage, the refusal to let circumstances define you. Samuel Hartley had learned that lesson through fire and blood and loss and compromise. And now he would teach it to his children so they could teach it to theirs, so that the Hartley name would mean something true and lasting for generations to come. Not land, Not money, not power, but character. And character was the only thing that truly lasted.